Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Aliana Kernodle. The Supreme Court said it would not hear a case brought by parents in Wisconsin against their school district over its lack of a parental notification policy for students who change their gender. Joining me to dig into this is Chalkboard News editor Brennan Clary. Brennan, what did the court have to say, and what was the dissenting opinion?
Basically, the court denied that it would hear the case, and there's a specific pathway to ask the court to hear a case that had a ruling on it from an appeals court or a lower court, and you can ask the court to weigh in on that, and then they can decide, are we going to take up the case or let the lower court ruling stand? And in this case, the court's majority said we're not going to hear the case. So all they have to say is the petition for the writ of cert is denied. And that's like the legal term that, and I don't know how to say the Latin there. I took Latin in college. You should know like how to say that. I'm just not going to try it here on the podcast. But there was a couple of judges who are named. So with that petition, they can just say like, we're done here. And sometimes I think that's as much as just like, we're not going to take it up and we don't really have to have an explanation. In this case, there was a couple of justices who said that they would grant the petition. So Justice Brooke Kavanaugh said that he would grant it. And then Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas, they both had a dissent. So Alito wrote the dissent, and then Thomas joined in, dissenting from that denial of certiorari. And essentially, they basically explain like, here's why we would have chosen this case to look at and then weigh in on it. And so you did have these conservatives, and again, nobody else jumped in on the dissent, but they felt like they needed to take the time to explain like, this is why we would have weighed in on it. And basically what they said is that this is illustrative of the national, contention over parental notification policies and policies governing how to handle private information from transgender students or like gender questioning students. And what they said is that they've been told that there are more than 1,000 districts that have these policies that basically prevent parents from knowing about their students' gender identity or changes to their students' gender identity. And so they said, basically they would have waited on this to talk about it because this, is going on in so many different classrooms around the country, or like so many different school boards around the country, that people are talking about this, that it has come up enough that they feel like they should weigh in on it. So essentially, in a nutshell, most of the court said, we're not going to talk about it enough, that, they're not going to bring this case, and that the lower court decision stands against the parents. So the school districts, the parents were challenging the school district, and they've been previously told by the lower court that they didn't have the ability to even bring the case because their own children were not transitioning or questioning their gender identity. So they didn't have standing. So basically they said, you can't challenge the school district on this policy because none of your children are in this boat. So you guys haven't been affected by it. You guys haven't shown that there is harm. And Alito and Thomas in their dissent said, you don't have to, because the school district's actions and what it says are enough to show that it would do that in that situation. So you could argue that. So in a nutshell, we had some justices saying we would have taken this case on if the majority of the court hadn't decided to deny it.
And what were the details? You already mentioned some of them, but like, who was bringing this suit and what was kind of the origins of it?
There's an organization of parents called Parents Protecting Our Children, and they would bring in a lawsuit against the Clare area school district in Wisconsin. And so basically they laid out how the school district had in 2021 passed issued an administrative guidance about gender identity support. And so specifically it has a what's called a student gender support plan. And you can see that copy of the student gender support plan on the district's website. Like, that's something that they've updated this year and is currently in use. And essentially it addresses a student's restroom use, participation in athletics, extracurriculars, co-curriculars, and social, medical, surgical, and or legal processes. And so it kind of talks about all these different dimensions of a student's social and physical transition. So it gets into a lot of these different, and then, support people who can be trusted with this information that students are sharing, staff that can be trusted, support staff, allies. So it has a lot of different comprehensive issues that it's taking into account for these students as a school district. And basically you can see as well, it asks staff to ask students, how comfortable are your parents with this? Like, do they support you or not? And the support plan document that they have, it also delineates that a student can change their name or their preferred name and their gender identity at school just by asking for it. But if you want to have that in the records of the school records, then you need a parent to say, at least one parent to say, like, I approve this, I sign off on this, and I'm okay with this. But a student can go to school staff and say, I want you to call me this name and I want you to use these pronouns because this is my gender identity. And the school will support that. And they want to balance looping family in, but also protecting students. And that's one of the big arguments from LGBTQ plus advocates, is that students should have the right to tell their parents when and how much information that they want to share. Parents have been arguing for years now that they should be clued in when students make decisions like this or are trying to make decisions like this. They need to know if their student is using a different gender identity at school, and that information should not be kept from them. And it's really interesting too. Public polling, I've written about this, has shown that most people agree that parents should have that notification. If something's going on there, then parents should be notified and should have that information. And so that's just like an interesting aspect of that, is that is broadly supported. But you do have some of these districts who have really leaned into, that we need to protect students at all costs. And that's ended up with litigation like this. And in California, there's also litigation from teachers and, from parents as well, and a lot of different controversies that have come out of school boards related to this.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.